Dorkings. Thank you, officer. I'll review these immediately.
In all my years on television, in all my years on the bench, my courtroom had never, and I mean never, witnessed the kind of raw, unfiltered rage I saw that day. I was sitting up there on the bench, under those bright studio lights, when Police Chief Benjamin Brennan stood in front of me, his face crimson with fury, his finger jabbing through the air like a weapon, and he screamed the words that would destroy his life forever. "I own you." So, you could have heard a pin drop after that. The silence was absolutely deafening. Every single person in that courtroom froze. The audience gasped, a collective horror, like someone had just punched all the air out of the room. Bird, my bailiff, did what he always does when things go sideways. He stepped forward instinctively, his hand already moving toward the chief, ready to intervene if he had to. But I sat perfectly still. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. My eyes narrowed into that death stare people like to talk about on television, the one that's made grown attorneys weep on national TV. And believe me, in that moment, he deserved every millimeter of it, because this wasn't just any defendant losing his temper. This was a 25-year police veteran, the current chief of the Oakwood Police Department, screaming at a decorated detective in open court, the woman he called ASA Detective Sarah Singania. She shrank back in her chair, trembling, as years of abuse came flooding back in a single moment of violence right in front of me. And what happened next didn't just end Chief Brennan's career in the most humiliating way imaginable. It exposed a decades-long pattern of corruption, abuse, and criminal behavior that had been hiding behind a badge. I was about to prove, clearly, loudly, on the record that no amount of authority, no position of power, and certainly no police chief was going to escape justice in my courtroom. That morning, Chief Benjamin Brennan walked into my courtroom with the confidence of a man who had never faced real consequences a day in his life. He was 52 years old, 25 years in law enforcement, and he carried himself like he was inspecting troops. Parade uniform perfectly pressed, chest heavy with commendations and medals, salt and pepper, buzz cut trimmed with military precision, tall, imposing, the kind of presence that makes rookie officers snap to attention the second he walks into a room. For 5 years as chief of Oakwood PD, he had run that department like a personal thief. And yes, you heard me correctly, like a personal thief, demanding absolute loyalty and crushing anyone who dared question his authority. His old-school cop reputation, you know the type, the tough guy who doesn't tolerate weakness, had made him practically untouchable inside his department. City council members were afraid to cross him. The mayor publicly praised his tough-on-crime approach. Internal affairs, they buried every complaint filed against him without even bothering with a real investigation. He believed he was invincible, and nothing in his 25-year career had ever proven otherwise. So when he walked into my courtroom, he looked at me and saw just another woman he thought he could intimidate into submission. He had no idea he was about to meet the first authority figure in his life who could not be bullied, threatened, or controlled. Across from him sat Detective Sarah Singania, and the contrast between them could not have been more stark. Sarah was 34. The youngest detective in Oakwood PD history, promoted just 8 years into her career purely on merit. Her case, closure rate, highest in the entire state. She'd solved 47 major investigations, earned multiple commendations for bravery, and become the department's most effective investigator. But to Chief Brennan, none of that mattered. To him, she was just another woman who, in his twisted little boys' club, did not belong. Sarah sat in the plaintiff's chair, clutching a thick folder to her chest, her hands trembling visibly. There were dark circles under her eyes, the kind you don't get from one bad night's sleep, but from months of it. She was a single mother to 2 daughters, 7 and 9. The stress of this legal battle had pushed her almost to the breaking point. Her little girls were asking why mommy couldn't afford their school supplies anymore, why they had to skip birthday parties, why their gymnastics classes were canceled. She tried to explain in words they'd understand. But tell me, how do you look at children and say, the police chief is trying to destroy your mother's life because she refused to accept his abuse? 3 years before that day, the harassment started, the moment she earned her detective shield. I've seen this pattern 1,000 times. He called her into his office and told her, women made terrible detectives, suggested she request a transfer back to patrol, or maybe dispatch, where she'd be more comfortable. She refused. Good. And then she did something even better. She proved him wrong. In her first 6 months, she closed 3 cold cases that had been unsolved for over 5 years. That's when his attitude shifted from dismissive to hostile. He started calling her sweetheart and honey in official meetings, humiliating her, making her the butt of jokes during briefings. He blocked cases from being assigned to her, giving them instead to less qualified male detectives. He scheduled her for the worst shifts, sent her on high-risk assignments without backup. In department emails, he referred to her as the diversity hire and made comments about her not being tough enough for real police work. So what did she do? Exactly what she was supposed to do. 6 months before stepping into my courtroom, she filed a formal sexual harassment complaint. And in response, he retaliated with the efficiency of a man who'd done this before. He placed her on immediate administrative leave, claiming she was emotionally unstable and unfit for duty. Her pay was cut by 40% while under investigation. Internal Affairs, staffed entirely by officers loyal to him, cleared him within 2 weeks, without interviewing a single witness she'd provided. Now she was facing the loss of her house, her career, and her ability to provide for those 2 little girls. This lawsuit, this was her last, desperate attempt at justice. The stakes weren't high. They were life or death for her and her children. That she was suing for $87,000 in lost wages and emotional damages, money she desperately needed to keep a roof over their heads and food on the table. And there he sat, on the other side of the courtroom, with his expensive attorney, both of them radiating smug confidence. He had never lost to a woman in his entire career, and he wasn't planning to start with me. The mayor issued a public statement supporting him. The city council stood behind him. Fellow police chiefs across the state sent letters of solidarity. He believed he was untouchable, wrapped in the blue wall of silence that has been protecting corrupt cops for generations. What he didn't know was that the night before this hearing, I had personally gone through every document, every complaint, every sealed record my research team could lawfully access. What he didn't know was that I had uncovered secrets about his past that were about to unravel everything. Before I walk you into the most shocking courtroom explosion you've ever witnessed, let me say this. If you're watching this and you care about accountability, about truth, about real justice, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because what I uncover about this police chief's criminal past will make your blood boil. And when I show you what he's been hiding, his entire life crumbles in less than 5 minutes. This is Judge Stories, and I'm Judge Judy. And in my world, justice always catches up with people who think they're above the law. So there I was. I looked up from the bench as Bird announced the case. My instincts, you don't get them from a textbook. You get them from decades of watching liars try to dance, kicked in immediately. I clocked his body language the second he stood there. He didn't stand the way most defendants do in my courtroom, with at least a hint of respect. No, he leaned back casually, one hand resting on the table like he owned it, and then he opened his mouth when he addressed me. He didn't say, "Your Honor." He said, "Ma'am." Now that might sound small to you, but in my courtroom, nothing is small. That ma'am was subtle, but absolutely deliberate. A tiny little signal. I don't respect you. I don't take you seriously. "Good morning, ma'am," he said, with this slight smile. "I appreciate you taking time to hear this case. I'm confident once you hear the facts, you'll see this is just another example of someone playing the victim card, instead of taking responsibility for their own poor performance." My eyebrow went up. My voice stayed professional. "Chief Brennan," I said, "we're here because Detective Singanya has filed suit against you for sexual harassment, retaliation, and wrongful constructive termination. She claims you created a hostile work environment and destroyed her career after she filed formal complaints. How do you respond to these allegations?" His smile got wider. "Your Honor." He finally used the correct title. "I run a police department with over 200 officers. We deal with real criminals, real danger, real life and death situations every single day. Sometimes people who aren't cut out for that kind of work look for excuses. Detective Singanya is a fine person, I'm sure, but she's simply not suited for detective work. That's not harassment. That's honest, professional assessment." I turned to Sarah. "Detective Singanya, tell me what happened." Her voice shook at first, but she was clear, precise. "A real cop, Your Honor. I was promoted to detective 3 years ago based on my performance record. I had the highest test scores in my class and had received multiple commendations as a patrol officer. Within my first 6 months as detective, I closed 3 cold cases that had been unsolved for over 5 years. But from day one, Chief Brennan made it clear he didn't want me in that position. She opened her folder and pulled out documentation. He sent me this email 2 weeks after my promotion. I took the paper and read it aloud. Detective Singh, I'm reassigning the Henderson murder case to Detective Marks. This case requires aggressive interrogation techniques and physical stamina that might be challenging for someone of your background. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable with property crimes or juvenile cases. I looked up at him. Someone of your background. What does that mean, Chief Brennan? He shifted in place. Your Honor, I was referring to her experience level. She was still relatively new to detective work. That's not what you meant, I said flatly. You meant she was a woman. With all due respect, ma'am, you're reading things into my words that aren't there. I treat all my officers equally regardless of gender. Sarah pulled out more documents. Her hands were still shaking, but her voice was getting stronger. Your Honor, here are 17 emails over a 2-year period where Chief Brennan refers to me as honey, sweetheart, or little girl in official department communications here. A performance review where he wrote that I'm too emotional for investigative work and should be reassigned to administrative duties more suitable for female officers. Here are witness statements from 6 other officers who heard him say in briefings that women make terrible cops and are only good for dispatch and filing. And here's the email he sent to the deputy chief after I filed my harassment complaint. I took that last email, read it silently, and as I read, my expression hardened. I looked up at him. Chief, did you write this email? I may have, yes, read it aloud for the court. He hesitated. For the first time, I saw that little crack in his confidence. Your Honor, taken out of context. Read it, Chief, now. His jaw tightened. He took the paper. Sana filed her complaint today. She's clearly looking for a payout. I'm recommending immediate administrative leave, pending a full investigation into her mental stability and fitness for duty. Make sure IA understands this is priority 1. We need to document everything that can be used to justify termination if necessary. The courtroom went silent again. I set the email down carefully, and I did not take my eyes off his face. So, let me understand this correctly. Chief, Detective Singhania files a harassment complaint, and within 24 hours, you're talking about terminating her employment and questioning her mental stability. That's retaliation. His face flushed red. Your Honor, with respect, you don't understand how police departments operate. When an officer files a baseless complaint, we have to investigate whether they're fit for duty. It's standard protocol. I leaned forward. Chief Brennan, I was a family court judge in New York for 25 years before my television career. I've handled thousands of employment disputes, harassment cases, and retaliation claims. Don't presume to tell me what I don't understand. I turned back to Sarah. Detective Singhania, what happened after this email? Her voice was barely above a whisper now, but every word landed. He put me on administrative leave the next day. My pay was cut by 40%. I couldn't work cases. Other officers were told not to speak to me or they'd face discipline. Internal Affairs interviewed me once for 20 minutes, never contacted any of my witnesses, and cleared him completely within 2 weeks. I've been on leave for 6 months now. My daughters don't understand why we can't afford food sometimes, why we might lose our house, why Mummy can't be a detective anymore. My expression stayed controlled, but believe me, everyone in that room could feel the fury building beneath it. I turned my attention back to him, and this time my questions got sharper, more surgical. Chief, how many female officers work in your department? 12, he answered. Out of how many total officers? 207. And how many of those 12 women hold supervisory positions? None. My eyebrow went up again. Not one. Well, we have a female sergeant in records management, he added quickly, but that's more of an administrative role. So, I said slowly, out of 207 officers, you have 12 women, and exactly 0 of them supervise actual police operations. That's correct. And you see nothing problematic about that. Your Honor, policing requires physical strength, aggression, the ability to make split-second life or death decisions under extreme pressure. Women can certainly contribute to law enforcement, but in support roles where their natural skills are better utilized. The audience gasped audibly. My voice dropped to a deadly calm. Natural skills. Enlighten me, Chief. What are women's natural skills? He walked right into the trap. Well, women are naturally more nurturing, better at communication, better at de-escalation, and administrative tasks. They're detail-oriented. Those are valuable traits for certain positions. But real street policing requires a different skill set that men are simply better equipped for biologically. I let that hang in the air. I wanted everyone to hear it, to really hear it. Detective Singanya, I said, what's your case closure rate compared to the male detectives in your department? She straightened. Your Honor, in my 3 years as detective before being placed on leave, I closed 47 cases with a 94% closure rate. The department average is 68%. The next highest detective closed 31 cases in the same period. I turned back to him. So this woman, who, according to you, lacks the natural abilities for real police work, has the highest performance metrics in your entire detective division. How do you explain that? His confidence was crumbling now, replaced with visible frustration. Statistics don't tell the whole story, Your Honor. Real policing isn't about numbers. It's about instinct, physicality, commanding respect, things that can't be measured on paper. My voice could have cut through steel. Things that can't be measured, like gender discrimination and retaliation. Chief, did you tell other officers that Detective Singanya was a diversity hire? I may have expressed concerns about the department's promotion policies. Did you or did you not tell your deputy chief that women don't belong in investigative roles? I said that traditional police work has always been male-dominated for good reasons. Did you tell Detective Singanya directly that she should go home and raise her kids instead of pretending to be a real detective? His face went from red to purple. Your Honor, you're twisting my words. These are taken completely out of context. I'm trying to run a professional police department, and people like her come in with agendas, filing frivolous complaints when they can't handle constructive criticism. My patience was gone. People like her. What does that mean, Chief? Now he was losing control completely. It means officers who look for reasons to be offended, who can't handle the reality of police work, who think they deserve special treatment just because they're women, or minorities, or whatever protected class they claim. Real cops don't file harassment complaints. Real cops do their jobs and don't play the victim. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. I raised my hand and shut it down. So, in your professional opinion, filing a legitimate harassment complaint makes someone not a real cop? That's not what I said. That is exactly what you said, Chief. Let me ask you something else. In your 25 years of law enforcement, how many officers have filed complaints against you? He hesitated, and I knew I'd hit something. I don't have that number off the top of my head. Guess maybe 3 or 4 over the years. All dismissed as baseless. All dismissed, I repeated. How convenient. And that is when everything exploded. I pressed harder. Chief Brennan, you've put Detective Singanya on leave, cut her pay, and recommended her termination. You've publicly stated that women don't belong in investigative roles. You've called her complaints baseless, without any real investigation. Do you understand that what you're describing is textbook retaliation and discrimination? He shot up from his chair so fast it scraped across the floor. Your Honor, you're making this about gender when it's about competence and departmental standards. I have a responsibility to maintain operational effectiveness, and I can't do that if I have to coddle officers who can't handle the job. My eyes narrowed, dangerously. Coddle, my voice dropped. Chief, sit down, now. But he was past the point of no return. 25 years I've given to law enforcement, he shouted. 25 years of risking my life, making the hard decisions, cleaning up the streets while judges like you sit in comfortable courtrooms and second-guess every command decision I make. You don't understand what it takes to run a department. You don't understand the pressures, the liability, the constant threat of lawsuits from people looking for paydays. My voice went almost to a whisper, and people who know me know that's when I'm the most dangerous. Chief Brennan, I'm warning you one final time. Sit down and control yourself. Instead of listening to the only person in that room who could help him, he turned on Sarah. He spun toward Detective Singanya, his face twisted with rage. No more mask, no more professionalism, just pure entitlement and fury. He jabbed his finger toward her as years of unchecked power came pouring out in one ugly, controllable moment. I own you, so I run that department. You work for me. You're nothing without that badge, and I can take it whenever I want. His words cracked through that courtroom like gunshots. Sarah recoiled in her chair, tears streaming down her face. her worst nightmare happening in front of millions of people watching at home. The audience erupted, gasps, shouts. Bird moved fast, putting himself between Brennan and Sarah. I stayed perfectly still for 3 long seconds. Those 3 seconds felt like an eternity. I was measuring him, measuring the damage, calculating exactly how hard I was going to drop the hammer. Then I spoke. "Sit down, Chief Brennan, right now, or my bailiff will make you sit down." He suddenly realized too late what he'd done, what he'd said on national television. His lawyer grabbed his arm, trying to shove him back into his chair. "Your Honor, my client is obviously under extreme stress." He misspoke in a moment of frustration. He didn't mean I cut him off with nothing more than a raised hand. "Your client just called a decorated police detective ASA and claimed he owns her in my courtroom, on camera. There's no walking that back, Counselor." He collapsed into his chair, the bravado gone. Reality was starting to sink in. I leaned forward. My voice had an edge now, the kind that promises destruction. "Chief Brennan, did you just tell Detective Singania that you own her?" I was angry. "I didn't mean it like that." "How did you mean it?" "I just meant that as her superior officer, she reports to me." "You said you own her, Chief. Those were your exact words. Explain to this court what you meant by that." His mouth opened and closed, but nothing useful came out. His lawyer was whispering frantically in his ear. I wasn't done. "Before we continue," I said, "I think the court needs to hear from some other people." I gestured toward the gallery. A woman in her mid-40s stood up, nervous, hands clasped tightly. "State your name for the record." "Lisa Martinez, Your Honor. I'm a former sergeant with Oakwood PD. Ms. Martinez, you have something you'd like to tell this court." Her voice shook, but like Sarah's, it grew stronger as she pushed through. "Your Honor, I left the department 2 years ago after Chief Brennan made my life unbearable. He did to me exactly what he's doing to Sarah. He called me sugar tits during briefings. He told other officers I only got promoted because I slept with the former chief, which was a complete lie. When I filed a complaint, he transferred me to midnight shifts and assigned me to the most dangerous calls without backup. One night, he cornered me in the parking garage, grabbed my arm hard enough to leave bruises, and told me that maybe I needed a real man to show me how to handle myself. I quit the next week because I was terrified. I never reported any of it because who would believe me over the police chief? The courtroom exploded into chaos. People shouting, reporters scribbling, cameras flashing. I raised my hand again. "Anyone else?" A man in uniform stood up in the back row. "Officer David Park, Your Honor, 10-year veteran of Oakwood PD. I've witnessed everything Detective Singania described. Chief Brennan told me directly that women make terrible cops, that they're only good for dispatch and filing. During a department meeting last year, he said female officers were affirmative action disasters, who lower departmental standards. When I defended Detective Singania and suggested her performance spoke for itself, he threatened to demote me to school crossing guard duty. He said if I kept siding with the girls, I'd regret it." I nodded slowly, taking it all in, then turned back to the chief. "Chief Brennan, you're hearing multiple officers testify to a pattern of harassment, discrimination, and retaliation. What do you have to say?" His voice was barely audible. "They're lying, all of them. They're coordinating their stories to destroy me." I smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "That's very interesting, Chief, because I have something else we need to discuss about your history of destroying people." I reached under my bench and pulled out a thick manila folder. The color drained from his face. "Chief Brennan, before I make my ruling on this case, my research team uncovered some very interesting information about your career history, information that is extremely relevant to your credibility and your fitness to serve as a police chief." His attorney shot to his feet. "Your Honor, my client's employment history is not relevant to this civil harassment case." My response was ice cold. When your client's entire defense is that he's a professional making fair command decisions, his history of similar behavior is absolutely relevant. "Sit down." I opened the folder slowly. Let the tension build. "It works every time. Chief Brennan, you worked for Riverside Police Department for 12 years before transferring to Oakwood, correct?" "Yes, that's correct." "And why did you leave Riverside?" "It was a career advancement opportunity. The position of deputy chief opened up at Oakwood and I took it." "That's interesting," I said, "because that's not what the sealed settlement documents say." He went rigid. "What settlement documents?" I pulled out a legal document and started reading. 8 years ago, Officer Amanda Foster filed a sexual harassment complaint against you at Riverside PD. You were a sergeant at the time. She accused you of making explicit sexual comments, sending inappropriate text messages, and cornering her in the evidence room where you touched her without consent. Department conducted an internal investigation and found sufficient evidence to recommend your termination. You could have heard his heart stop from where I was sitting. I kept going. However, the city attorney was concerned about the publicity of a trial and the potential civil liability, so they offered you a deal. Riverside PD would pay Officer Foster $125,000 to settle her claims. In exchange, you would agree to resign and transfer to a different department. All records would be sealed to protect the department's reputation. You accepted that deal and came to Oakwood, whose background check never uncovered the settlement because it was sealed. His lawyer jumped up again. Your Honor, those records are sealed by court order. How they were obtained is highly questionable and they should not be admissible in these proceedings. My smile turned predatory. Counselor, sealed doesn't mean erased. It means hidden. And when someone with a history of sexual harassment becomes a police chief and continues that exact same pattern of behavior, the public has a right to know. These documents were obtained through proper legal channels, and they're staying in the record. I turned back to him. He looked like a ghost. So Oakwood PD hired you as deputy chief, then promoted you to chief, with absolutely no knowledge that you'd been forced out of your previous department for sexual harassment. Chief Brennan, did you disclose this settlement when you applied to Oakwood? I wasn't required to. It was sealed. That's not what I asked. Did you disclose it? He said nothing. He didn't need to. Silence can be very loud. I wasn't done. I pulled out another document. But that's not all, is it, Chief? 15 years ago, you were arrested for domestic assault. He snapped. What? That case was dismissed. Dismissed doesn't mean it didn't happen. I said. I read from the police report. Officers responded to a domestic disturbance call at your residence. Your girlfriend at the time, Rebecca Lawson, had visible marks on her throat. She told responding officers that you grabbed her by the neck during an argument and told her, and I quote, "I own you. You'll do what I say, or you'll regret it." You were arrested and charged with assault. The courtroom erupted again. He jumped to his feet. Those charges were dropped. She refused to testify. Because you intimidated her into silence, I said, cold as ice, just like you've intimidated every woman who's tried to stand up to you. The same words, Chief. 15 years ago, you told a woman you owned her. Today, you screamed the same thing at Detective Singanya. This isn't a pattern. It's your entire personality. His lawyer was practically begging the air for mercy. Your Honor, this is character assassination. These incidents are decades old and have no bearing on the current case. They have every bearing. I snapped. Your client came into my courtroom claiming to be a professional who makes fair command decisions. Instead, I'm looking at a man who has spent 25 years abusing women, covering up his crimes, and using his badge as a weapon. I pulled out one last set of documents. And speaking of weapons, let's talk about the department credit card, shall we? He looked like he might vomit. Over the past 3 years, Chief Brennan, you've charged $23,000 in personal expenses to the Oakwood Police Department's operational credit card, dinners at 5-star restaurants with no operational justification, hotel rooms in Las Vegas billed as training conferences that don't exist. According to the conference organizers I contacted, weekend trips to Atlantic City, charged as undercover operations with no corresponding case files. You're not just a misogynist, Chief Brennan, you're a thief. The room was total chaos now, but my voice cut right through it. I've heard enough. Here is my ruling. I turned to Sarah. I find in favor of the plaintiff, Detective Sarah Singanya. Chief Brennan, you will pay Detective Singanya $87,000 in lost wages and an additional $150,000 in punitive damages for emotional distress. That is $237,000 that you will pay personally, not your department. Your badge doesn't protect you here. Your rank means nothing in this courtroom. You are a bully, a predator, and a disgrace to every honest police officer in this country. He tried to speak, but nothing came out. I leaned forward one last time. You thought you could intimidate me the way you've intimidated everyone else in your career. You thought calling me stupid would make me back down. Instead, you just proved exactly what kind of man you are. Detective Singanya is a hero for standing up to you. This case is closed. But Chief, your problems are just beginning. Court dismissed. My gavel came down like thunder. Within hours, the clip of him screaming, "I own us," a slip, a snarl, whatever you want to call it, went viral. 15 million views in the first day alone. By sunset, his career was finished. By the end of the week, he was facing criminal charges. And Detective Sarah Tsinganya, the woman who walked into my courtroom trembling and afraid, walked out vindicated, her daughter's future secured, her faith in justice, finally, restored. If you believe corrupt police chiefs deserve to lose everything when they abuse their power, hit that subscribe button and share this story. In my courtroom, justice always wins. I'm Judge Judy. I'll see you next time.